Hello and welcome to the Kankakee Area Football Podcast. I'm Steve Soucie, joined today once again by Mason Schweizer. How are we doing this morning, Mason?
Couldn't be better. How are you doing, Seuss?
Not too bad. Getting ready for week 3 here, as I'm sure you are as well. And, it seems like we've kind of gotten pretty much what we've expected from the first 2 weeks from area teams. What has been your impression of kind of the overall look at things?
It's been a really fun first 2 weeks. I think we've had some teams, whether it be in town like Bradley, Bourbonnais, and Bishop McNamara, whether it be, kind of our more outside coverage area, teams like Clifton Central. We've had some teams really, really make some big statements to start the season and come out with some really good 2-0 starts.
So let's start in the city, like you mentioned there. For the most part, city schools off to a pretty good start so far. Bradley Bourbonnais out 2-0. Another what I thought was pretty impressive victory over a pretty talented Crete team. I don't take a lot of stock in the fact that Crete is 0-2 at this point. I still think that's a really good team and will be heard from by the end of the year. So once again, another, I thought, solid showing for the Boilermakers.
Yeah, I was really surprised, and maybe we shouldn't be doubting this Bradley Bourbonnais defense at all. And not like I was or anything, but they had a really good offense that, like you said, Crete Moniz is a really good team. And they held that offense off the scoreboard until the final minute of the game. That's, a team with all-state quarterback and receiver and Darren Couch and Dorian Patterson, a blue-chip running back like Jeremiah Stonewall, and the defense has really been super impressive through 2 weeks. The offense – I heard you talking with Matt Rodewald on Friday night during Live with Friday Night Drive about, we knew this offense was going to be really good. And the fact that the defense has been just as good, if not better, that bodes really well for them, whether they end up in Class 7A or, like your predictions have been showing, potentially down in Class 6A for the Boilers. They keep playing the way that they have the first 2 weeks. Whatever class they're in, they're going to be a very tough out, I think.
They now move into the conference schedule with Waubonsie Valley this week. That's a team that, I think Bradley is in pretty good shape for, but what do you see as the big keys for them as they move into the conference portion of their season, where I think some of the opponents, bring a little bit different look, and some of them I think will give probably Bradley their biggest test of the season.
Yeah, well, as we know from last year, falling to Lincoln Way Central during the regular season and in the playoffs, that's kind of the game that they've really got circled this year. But, Waubonsie, another team who, like kind of Crete Moniz, don't put too much stock in them being 0-2. They have a really good running quarterback in a really good quarterback in Colin Ford, who just so happens to run the ball really well. If they can kind of keep him at bay and from, going off in a dual threat manner, I think they should be all right this week. But once you start getting into, I believe they've got Lincoln Way Central and Lincoln Way West 2 weeks in a row, or those 2 games in a 3-week span. Maybe that's going to kind of be that stretch that really determines how well their regular season goes, I think.
Moving on to Kankakee, I think we kind of expected them to probably have a really rough time this week. I thought they had a little rougher time than I was expecting with Lincoln Way East. They were kind of run off the field there in the first half. This was built with purpose, though, this non-conference schedule, because now we're entering the Southland Conference schedule, which, let's be honest, Kankakee has dominated that league, especially the teams in the lower rungs there. So, what do you feel like Kankakee took away from that game as they head into, let's just be blunt, the easier portion of their schedule?
Well, I don't know if there's a whole lot that you can really take away that's good. That might have been one of those games where, hey, let's burn the film, forget about it. We know that that's not the team we are. But, man, you probably know better than I do. The way that Lincoln Way East handled Maine South week 1, and then Maine South turns around and does a similar, whooping to Warren, and now doing this to Kankakee. That Lincoln Way East team probably even better than we thought somehow. But I think if you're the K's, like you said, heading into a little bit of the weaker chunk of the Southland schedule, they've got Thornridge this week, and 4 games since Thornridge came over to the Southland. the K's have won those 4 meetings by a combined 2-12-0 score. So the K's got to be feeling good. They're on the road this week, and then they have to go down to Normal Community for another really tough non-conference game. So it's going to be really of the utmost importance for the K's to not only go up and get a win this week, but get some confidence back under their wings. You know, they've got a lot of kids who are new varsity, key contributors, and I think it'd be really big for them to just kind of get a win this week, get that confidence going, get something in the W column, and get moving.
So Bishop McNamara improved to 2-0 with a win over Herscher on Friday night. I know you were at that game, so I'm interested in getting your impressions from what happened there. I'd also kind of want to verify a little bit. I listened to the majority of your broadcast on the radio, and I kind of got the sense that maybe Herscher ran out of a little bit of a gas. We'll talk about Herscher a little bit later. But, guess what did you take away from that game out at Herscher? It felt like Bishop McNamara put together a pretty complete game in that one.
They did. I think that if you're Coach Youngblood, if you're a fan of the Irish, you are really happy with the result of what I texted you during it, and I said, hey, this game's finally a banger. This is the third time these rivals have gotten back together, and the first 2 games were both decided by a touchdown. This one a little bit more, but the competition on the field, the talent on the field was so much better than it was the last couple of years. It was a back and forth game. Herscher led at halftime by a pair. The first 5 possessions of the second half all exchanged the lead. You thought when Mason Roberts returned a punt for the Tigers, or a kickoff, for a touchdown, that might kind of be the big momentum play that might jolt things for the Tigers. Max strikes right back, gets a couple turnovers. I don't necessarily know if it was really Herscher getting tired. I think the Irish, they forced a big turnover on 4th down, got Tanner Jones to fumble while he was being chased out of the pocket. The Irish went down and scored the next play, and then a fumbled kickoff. The Irish recover with 2 minutes left and are able to run things out. I think the Irish just kind of rose to the occasion when they needed to and made some plays. And, man, the addition of Malachi and Michael Lee into that offense and Coach Youngblood's triple option offense, you want to try and stop Malachi. You want to try and stop Julius May, who's got 7 touchdowns through 2 games. There's just a lot of firepower that really a year or 2 was not there.
So when you look at Bishop McNamara, once again, another one of these teams moving into their conference schedule. We talked a little bit about this over the last couple of weeks in regards to the Chicagoland Christian Conference. Kind of a conference that has kind of been the haves and the have-nots. And for the last few years, Bishop McNamara has kind of fallen into the upper half of that have-not group. They haven't been able to kind of break into that. I guess you would kind of call it the Big Four in that league over the last couple of years. It sure looks like they're capable of doing that this year, wouldn't you think?
I think so. It's a conference that I think really is been a pretty serviceable, smaller school, suburban-ish, Catholic school conference, private school conference. And Wheaton Academy has really kind of been the head of the class in that conference, and I think they are until somebody says otherwise, but there's a good chance it could be those Fighting Irish this year. Aurora Christian, always going to be good under Coach Beebe, but I think this year it's looking so far like it might be a 3-horse race between those 3 teams.
Sounds good. We're going to talk a little bit about Illinois Central 8 football. I almost called it the I-8. I still do that from time to time. And some Vermilion Valley action when we get back, but right now a word from some of our sponsors.
I'm State Representative Steve Reich. Since 2017, I've led the fight to reform our child welfare system and supported educational choice for every kid in Illinois. I've worked to stop the collapse of our public pensions while standing up for businesses that are being crushed by crippling mandates. And I've never forgotten who pays the bill. The work isn't finished, and as I run for re-election, I'm asking for your support. I'm Steve Reich, and I approve this message.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Britton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike, with dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country. We meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Welcome back to the Kankakee Area Football Podcast. Look now at the Illinois Central 8 and kind of as they enter that conference season. Well, we'll start with the kingpins of the conference. Wilmington with what I think Piatone would like to say is a rivalry game for them. It's one of those games where Piatone has given Wilmington some pretty decent games over the past few years, and I'm sure they'd like to try to have that continue. They've never been quite able to get over that hump and pick up that big win, but Piatone kind of got it handed to them a little bit last week with their non-conference game against Marengo. What was the impression that you were able to gather from what came out of that game?
Well, I was a bit surprised by the final score. I think the Blue Devils probably were too. I think you were probably a little bit as well. But I know Coach Siamas well enough to know that he's going to use this as a good lesson for this team. One that we've talked about as a lot of juniors who are getting really their first taste, whether it be on varsity football at all or like as a big part of a varsity football team. So I think that this could be one of those moments where, hey, long-term, this is something we needed. We kind of needed to get our butts kicked a little bit, get humbled down. And like you said, coming now into a rivalry matchup where I can't tell you how many times I've, said, well, this rivalry and these two physical styles is going to be as bruising, and purple and blue is the two schools' uniforms. This one always gets really intense, and Wildcats surely looking good after last week's big win against Sandwich. And, this Blue Devils team is going to be eager to get back and score an upset after their big loss last week.
Also has the potential to maybe be one of the fastest games being played around here. Neither one of these two teams too prone to passing the ball a whole heck of a lot. Yeah. So, all right, on to the next one in this conference. This is one we talked a little bit about this the other day. I think this is a pretty intriguing matchup because I think we're still trying to figure out, even after 2 weeks, exactly what these two teams are as Manteno challenges Herscher. Manteno out of the gate quickly here with a 2-0 record, still really can't get a real good feel for exactly, what to expect from them moving forward. What have you been able to gather on them? I know the one thing that kind of surprised me a little bit about week 2 is they kind of scuffled a little bit early to get away from a Plano team that really had a rough go of it in the first week of the season. So I'm just curious as to what you've been able to ascertain about what happened there.
Well, that with Connor Harrod as your quarterback, his third year, that you're going to get great play out of him. He's got more than 250 passing and rushing yards apiece. He's run for 6 touchdowns already. Like you said, it took a while to get things going against a Plano program that's kind of struggled as of late. But I think the Panthers, they're another team where outside of Connor, he's got a couple of his receivers back, but I think the guy who's been his top target through the first 2 weeks, Briggs Can, he's largely new to being a big varsity focal point. Their offensive line is almost entirely new. They're still kind of getting some continuity and camaraderie, and they're going to have to be ready to go up front against this Herscher front who was just moving people last week against McNamara, especially at the start. You've seen them a little bit. That's a group that Coach Mosier really, really loves. They're big and strong and nasty up front. And I think that's where this one's going to be decided. And the Panthers probably a little quicker at the skill spots. And if you are Mantino and you see what Mac was able to do with that kind of combo of size and speed at the skill positions, if you can get kids like Briggs can the ball in space, if your quarterback Connor Harrod can get the ball in space, you've got to feel good about your chances. If you're the Tigers, you've got the size and physicality advantage, and you want to try and use that. But this is, I think, a no doubt game of the week in the Illinois Central 8 this week.
And when we look at Herscher, I mean, I think both of us liked the makeup of this team, but like we were talking about, I mean, it feels like they still are kind of searching for one of these wins that, to be frank, they're gonna have if they want to get themselves back into the playoff draw. This is an opportunity for one of those wins. But when I talk about, one of these wins, it's a win over a team that they've struggled to beat over the last couple of years. When we're talking about, Mantino, Piatone, I mean, and somewhat lesser respect, Reed Custer, like these, I mean, in order for them to get to 5 now that they're sitting at 1-1, they have to beat one of these teams that they haven't traditionally beaten over the last couple of years. So this is their first chance to get one of those wins. Obviously, I'd like to get a couple of those wins in the long term. But when you talk about the Illinois Central 8, you start with Wilmington and Coal City, and then you try to sort it out in the middle. For the last few years, Herscher has found themselves kind of near the bottom of that stack. They're trying to get up more towards the top. This game in particular, I think, would be a huge one for them to get to kind of maybe not a statement win, but indicating that, yes, they are ready to, at the very least, be in the middle of this conference race rather than towards the bottom.
Yeah, a statement win maybe for their own program to just say, hey, we can get a win like this.
Yeah. Indeed. So moving on to Reed Custer, they've got Streeter this week. A pretty solid win for Reed Custer last week. I expected them to win the football game, but it looked like they did it pretty easily, especially when you consider this is a program that was 1-8 last year, and an easy win for them seemed like something that might have been a little bit out of reach heading into this year. But it really looked like they dominated that game on both sides of the football.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you get a shutout win and you can win by 30-plus points, you'll take that. The first win of Coach Joe Turek's head coaching career. Really exciting for the folks in Braidwood. They've got some really talented sophomores, a couple of whom are really starting to imprint themselves. They did all their damage on the ground, and they've got a lot of size up front that they were able to kind of get behind and use. And that's another team who, like you said, as we start conference play, if the Comets can reel off a win or two that maybe at the start of the year you didn't think they were going to, that you've got your is Reed Custer, are they taking the forfeit loss with Lyle not playing this year?
Yeah, that is in week 9. Yes, as of right now, they do not have a game scheduled.
So you look at it from that standpoint of basically 2 wins right now. You've got a chance at home against Streeter to get to 3 already at this point in the season. And you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, but I mean, I think that folks in Braidwood would have taken that position at this point in the year if you would have proposed it to them at the start.
Looking now at Coal City, it has one of the first of what I would classify as odd games in the Illinois Central 8 schedule due to what you just mentioned, the Lyle situation. Some teams elected to pick up a game rather than claim the forfeit victory. Coal City was one of those teams. They're playing Bloom this week, a 2-0 team from 8A that on paper you would look at it and say, boy, this is a very strange matchup. But I appreciate what Coal City is doing here. I mean, it would have been easy for them to, just take the forfeit victory and move on. But I'll be honest with you, even though Bloom is 2-0 and an 8A school, I still think Coal City is going to win this football game. That's how much respect I have for, what Coal City is, even though it's a much bigger school. Bloom's 2-0 record is a little deceptive. The opponents have not been very good at all to this point. So I think, Coal City will go into this game, even though they're coming off a loss. It's coming off a loss to a very good program. They were extremely competitive in that game. It was a field goal range loss. So, I mean, when you look at it on paper, you're thinking to yourself, boy, Coal City, much, much bigger school, looks like they're in good shape. I actually think Coal City's in a good place. How about you?
I do too. I will say everything I've heard, read, and seen about that Coal City and Richmond Burton game last week was that it was as advertised in terms of being two really good football programs just doing battle for 48 minutes. I heard that was a tremendous game. I'm pretty intrigued by how this Bloom team can end up doing this year. Like you said, a 2-0 start. Former Simeon head coach Dante Colbreth over there this year. He had a lot of success up in the CPS, now coming down to Bloom. But I think that this Coal City, this offensive line is going to be too much. The defensive line is really, I think, going to be able to wreak havoc. I think this can be a really good, successful day for the Kohlers, who, like you said, are going to be right there with Wilmington. The two teams meet week 9, probably going to be to decide the conference championship. But I think that this can be a really fun, unique, and interesting game. Like you said, the size difference in terms of enrollments and things makes this for a pretty fun one. And I'm very curious long-term to see how this Bloom program shapes out.
Moving over to the Vermilion Valley, I went down and took in about a quarter and a half of the Clifton Central Moments game on Friday night. And Clifton Central really impressed me, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I felt like they were constantly spending their evening in the Moments backfield, making life really difficult for Moments' talented quarterback, Eric Castillo. He just really couldn't find a rhythm. So, basically, I was really impressed with what I saw from Central. They've got a Georgetown Ridge Farm team this week that I think they're in good shape against. What have you been able to pick up on the Comets so far this year?
Well, Soucie, I actually want to ask you a question since you were down there the other night. I was doing my voting for the Associated Press polls last night, and I got to Class 1A, and I'm thinking to myself, am I being crazy if I vote for Clifton Central number 1 in Class 1A? I didn't. I thought about it. I put them pretty high up there. I've been very, very impressed. I mean, the top 2 teams in this conference for the last couple of years, Bismarck, Henning, and Moments, the Comets have combined to just mollywop the 2 of them.
Yeah,
they've 34 to 13 and 48-14. Like, it doesn't get much more dominant and impressive than that. I'm really curious for when this team gets together with Westville later in the year. I think that's going to be just an awesome game. But I'm really, really high on this Comets team. I hope I'm not getting too high on them, but I think that you're kind of in my boat where you've been very impressed with them.
Yeah, I am. I haven't gone that far yet. I filled out my ballot the other day as well, and I've got them in the top 5. I'm still kind of reluctant to put them above the superpowers yet. There was a little bit of a statewide shakeup in the 1A rankings with Lena Winslow getting beat by Stockton this week. But I was also very high on Stockton heading into that game as well. So that wasn't shocking. But, I think Central deserves to be on the fringe of that conversation at this point in time. Like you, I'm fascinated with, what happens when they play Westville. Westville worked over Bismarck Henning as well in week 2. So, and that's something that we haven't seen in a really long time. Bismarck Henning sitting at 0-2 after 2 games and getting beaten soundly by both of their opponents at this point. So maybe that Westville game is a good matchup. I think we'll get a little bit more information now with Westville now playing Moments in week 3. Like I said, Moments, I feel like they will eventually get this together. I think they've got some components, but they looked a little overwhelmed, particularly trying to block Central's front 7. They just really didn't have a lot of luck doing that. Like I mentioned before, Eric Castillo looks like he's a solid, experienced quarterback back there for Moments, but he's got to have a little bit more time to do stuff than he had on Friday night. He was really running for his life most of the games. So at least what I saw. So I think that's going to be an interesting measuring stick game to kind of maybe get a comparative line between Central, and Westville. As now both of them will have played Moments, both of them will have played Bismarck Henning. And once again, I too am looking forward to that game between those two. Now moving down to the other two members of the Vermilion Valley from the area, Watseka has Oakwood this week. I think Oakwood has already proven that I think they're maybe a couple of steps ahead of Watseka. What do we look for from that game?
I think Oakwood's proving not just that, but that they're maybe not too many steps away from Westville and Clifton Central, maybe right there below them. Their offense in Oakwood's been really good. Cameron Lee, a guy who just briefly was the head coach at Iroquois West, who we'll also get to, he's got this offense absolutely humming. Watseka's defense is pretty solid. It's pretty stout. So I think that could be a really interesting matchup. The Warriors, they just got to be able to finish off some drives, find the end zone. They only did once last week against Iroquois West, which was enough for a 7-6 victory. They've got 5 returning starting offensive linemen that can create some holes. They just got to finish off some drives, and I think they'll be in a little bit better standing. And obviously against a team like Oakwood that can put on the points, really going to have to be able to put some up yourself. But I do think that this Oakwood team is another one that could end up making some noise by the end of the season, especially through the BBC.
Iroquois West rounds out the group. You mentioned them just getting nipped last week in that loss to Watseka. They have Salt Fork this week. This would be a game that maybe over the past couple of years I'd be really worried about Iroquois West's chances. But it looks like maybe Salt Fork has taken a little bit of a step back, and maybe Iroquois West can bridge that gap a little bit and make this one competitive.
Yeah, we shall see how that can go. The Raiders still trying to kind of find their offensive identity, I guess you could say. They really love what quarterback Aiden Miller can bring to them. But they do have 2 senior running backs, Christian Gaitan and Damian Malgoza, that they really try and kind of feed things through. And Gaitan going to be a big part of that pass game too. Allow 7 points like you do last week. You think most of the time you're going to win those games. So the Raiders, they had 1 combined win in 2023 and 24, and they were a point away from a 2-0 start here this season. So I think that things are certainly looking up for them. Salt Fork a bit tougher of a test than they've had the first couple of games, I think, but a winnable game for them at home. And I'm curious to see, the VVC, it's always tough to kind of see how it's going to shake out being in a locked conference. You don't get any non-conference games for any of these teams to kind of use as a measuring stick. So as you start getting through these 9 weeks and then onto the playoffs, it's really like, all right, which ones of these teams are going to be able to win some playoff games, and once things get through here.
Quick shout out to the 2 8-man teams represented from the area, both St. Anne and MCP moving to 2-0 on the season. Do you know off the top of your head when those 2 teams play? Because it looks like we're on our way to some sort of collision course later in the season.
Week 4, and it's on a Thursday. So that's actually pretty good. Tiffany Blanchett, our photographer, and I were just talking about how this breaks nicely for us to make a little trip down to Milford together here. And I believe it is next Thursday. But yeah, what you mentioned this though, Soucie, real quick. I just got to say, since you said a shout out, there is one that I forgot we need to give. Somebody who I'm assuming you're going to know who this is out in Herscher gave me a good idea for a new name for our podcast. This gentleman said that we should be calling the podcast the Paul McAndrews Show. So you can who came up with that idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Shout out to our man Paul out there at Herscher, a big fan of high school sports in general, and a good friend of both of ours. So yeah, that's funny. But so as we head into week 3, where are you gonna be? What are you taking in on Friday night?
So I will be at Bradley Bourbonnais and Waubonsie. I'm really curiously excited to see this Bradley Bourbonnais team in action for the first time this year. We've got another game just a little bit south of there, Bishop Mack hosting Christ the King, looking to get to 3-0. But I think our game of the week and our week 3 football preview capsules, which you can grab online or in print today, the game of the week, I think pretty convincingly for our area is that Herscher and Mantino game. You and I were really going back and forth on who the Friday Night Drive pick should be for that one. We settled on Mantino. They've won this one the last couple of years. Until the Tigers can win one of these big games, you gotta go with the Panthers. But I think that this one, flip a coin on who's gonna end up winning it. Could be like what last week was shaping up to be for Herscher, where hey, whichever team's got the ball last is gonna win. But I think that that's gonna be an absolute slobber knocker this week.
Sounds great. Looking forward to all the games in week 3. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week.